The desert sun hung low over the vast red canyons, brushing the rugged land with molten gold as the dry wind whispered stories older than any living soul, and in the middle of this endless wilderness rode a lone cowboy named Ethan Hale, a man known more for silence than words, more for kindness than swagger, and more for the storms he carried in his heart than any thunder the sky could muster. His head tilted low, his boots worn from 1,000 miles, Ethan had spent years drifting across the southwest searching not for fortune or fame but for a place where the restlessness inside him might finally settle, and on this particular evening he found himself crossing into Apache land, not with intention nor arrogance but simply following the trail of a wounded horse he had rescued weeks before, as if fate itself had taken the reins and pulled him toward a story he never asked for but desperately needed without knowing it, and while the delicate glow of dusk painted the world with a tender beauty, fate unveiled its harsh, thrilling face when Ethan's horse stumbled upon something half buried beneath a mound of earth near a dried riverbed, an object so bright, so unnatural in a place untouched by modern greed that Ethan's breath halted in his chest as he dismounted, pushed the sand aside with trembling hands, and uncovered not one but several gleaming bars of gold stacked like forgotten treasure from an older world or a desperate secret left behind by someone who needed the desert to swallow it whole. The air thickened as he stared at the impossible wealth glittering beneath the lengthening shadows, and for a brief flicker of time he imagined what life might look like if he took even a single bar. Visions of a ranch he could finally call home, a life free from wandering, maybe even a chance to outrun the ghosts of his past. But just as the waves of temptation washed over him, the soft sound of footsteps behind him shattered the moment, and Ethan turned to find two Apache guards stepping silently from the brush, their faces stern but not hostile, their posture firm yet curious, for they too had clearly been tracking the same secret treasure, and as their dark eyes met his blue ones, the air between them held a tension that could crumble into violence or rise into unexpected honor. Ethan slowly stood, raising his empty hands with a respect rarely seen from outsiders, and for several long seconds no one spoke until one of the guards, a tall man named Nige with a voice like steady thunder, pointed at the uncovered gold and asked why a cowboy alone in the desert would dare trespass upon sacred land to steal what did not belong to him. But Ethan, steady as the horizon and true as the morning star, simply replied that he didn't come to steal anything, that he had no claim to this land or its secrets, and that he would walk away with empty hands just as he had arrived. And though his words were plain, something in his tone carried the weight of sincerity, something that softened the suspicion in Niche's eyes as the second guard, Taza, younger but fierce, stepped forward to test him, picking up one bar of gold and offering it to him, watching closely to see whether greed would win or goodness would prevail. But Ethan didn't even reach for it, instead shaking his head slowly and saying that a man's worth wasn't measured by what he could take but by what he could walk away from, even when the world glittered at his feet, and the honesty in his voice struck both guards with a quiet awe, for few men had ever stood before such temptation without faltering, fewer still on land that wasn't theirs, and after a long silence Nige nodded, signaling that Ethan should go, though his expression carried the flicker of unspoken respect, and Ethan, feeling the moment etch itself onto his soul, mounted his horse and rode away as the sun dipped completely behind the canyon walls, leaving the gold and the tribe's secrets untouched. Yet long after he left, the story of the cowboy without greed traveled through the Apache camps like a wildfire of wonder, whispered around fires at night as elders said perhaps the Great Spirit had sent a test and the wandering white man had passed it with the heart of a warrior, though Ethan himself never knew the legend he had unintentionally created, continuing instead his lonely wandering across the states for more than a decade, carrying the memory of that moment in the desert as a quiet reminder that the right thing is often the hardest thing. And while the world changed around him and he survived storms, hunger, heartbreak, and nights so cold stars seemed to shatter above him, he never once doubted the choice he had made that day. But destiny is patient and memory is long, especially among those who value honor above wealth, and somewhere in the heart of the Apache nation the story of Ethan Hale waited, growing roots across 13 years until the day it would bloom again and call him back into a future richer than any gold he left behind, a future he could never imagine yet desperately needed. And dear viewer, if you want to hear what destiny delivers in Chapter 2, make sure you subscribe to the channel now, because this is only the beginning of a story where courage, honor, and fate collide in ways that will leave you breathless, inspired, and eager for more. So hit that subscribe button and stay with us as Ethan's journey continues toward a moment that will change his life and the tribe's forever. 13 long years passed like wind, carving silent scars into the canyons, and the memory of the gold Ethan Hale once discovered had faded into the background of his wandering life, though not from the hearts of the Apache who remembered the cowboy who walked away from riches out of respect for their land and their people. And while Ethan drifted from job to job, herding cattle in Wyoming, mending fences in Texas, guiding travelers through dangerous passes in Arizona. Something inside him grew quiet, tired, almost hollow, as if life had taken more than it ever returned, and on a night when the desert moon shone pale and lonely across distant plains, Ethan found himself camped beneath a twisted old mesquite tree, his fire crackling softly while memories drifted through his mind like smoke, reminding him of a younger version of himself, the man who once made a choice that proved his worth, though he felt his worth diminishing with each lonely year. Yet just as sleep began to pull at his eyes, a faint rhythm echoed from beyond the ridge, a steady thumping like drums carried on the wind, and before Ethan could rise fully, shadows emerged from the darkness, horsemen, silent, disciplined, moving in a formation that made the hairs on his neck stand tall, and when the riders finally stepped into the firelight, he recognized the patterns painted on their faces, the beadwork on their garments, the respectful yet firm expressions, Apache warriors, and at their lead was Nige, aged but strong, the same man Ethan had met more than a decade earlier. Though time had etched deeper wisdom into his eyes, Ethan stood slowly, unsure whether he should reach for his weapon or extend a hand, but Nige made the choice for him as he dismounted and approached with a solemn nod before saying, "Ethan, hail, we have searched long for you," his voice carrying the weight of years and promises, and Ethan, bewildered but respectful, asked why men from so far away would seek a drifting cowboy like him, but Nige only gestured for him to mount his horse and join them, saying that questions would be answered in the place where they began, and though confusion wrapped around his thoughts, something deeper, an instinct, a pull of fate, urged Ethan to follow without protest, and so he rode with them through the night, traveling across silent valleys and moonlit ridges until finally the first light of dawn brushed gold across the desert, revealing the familiar canyons Ethan had once crossed, the same land where his life had turned on an invisible hinge 13 years earlier. As they reached the Apache village, elders and children gathered quietly, watching with expressions that held something Ethan couldn't decipher: gratitude, judgment, expectation, and at the center of the village they led him to a large fire pit where the tribe's council waited, their faces solemn, their eyes following him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. But before he could speak, Nige addressed the council, recounting every detail of the day Ethan discovered the hidden gold and the choice he made to leave it untouched, a story Ethan had almost forgotten but the tribe had preserved like a sacred truth. And when Nige finished, an elder named Yiska stepped forward holding a carved wooden box decorated with symbols of honor and ancestry, and he told Ethan that the gold he once refused had belonged to their people, stolen long ago and hidden by outlaws before the tribe reclaimed it, and that Ethan's decision not only protected their claim but preserved their dignity, something far more valuable than any treasure. And because of that, the Apache believed he had unknowingly become part of their story, and now they wished to repay him for the honor he showed. Ethan protested, saying he needed no reward, that doing what was right never needed repayment, but Yiska raised a hand, silencing him with the authority of centuries, and told him that refusing this gift would be refusing their gratitude, which would dishonor the tribe, and so the box was opened, revealing inside not gold but a beautifully crafted necklace holding a round stone carved with the symbol of the Great Spirit, a token of protection and belonging known only to those the Apache considered family, and Ethan, overwhelmed, felt his chest tighten with emotion as he accepted the gift, realizing that sometimes the greatest treasures were not wealth but the recognition of one's heart. But the ceremony was not finished, for Yiska then pointed toward the canyon where Ethan had found the gold, and a group of younger warriors stepped forward carrying a long cloth bundle which they unwrapped to reveal one final gift: a strong, magnificent horse with a coat like polished copper and eyes sharp as flint, a horse bred and raised by the tribe as a symbol of respect, and as Ethan approached the animal, it bowed its head toward him as if recognizing something noble within him, and when he placed his hand on its neck, a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging he had never felt before, a quiet whisper from fate telling him his journey had never been aimless but had been leading him back to this moment. After the ceremony, Nige walked with Ethan to the canyon's edge where the wind carried memories through the air, and he told him that the tribe did not repay him with gold because gold fades, gets stolen, or fuels greed, but instead with honor, protection, and kinship, gifts that last longer than a lifetime. And Ethan, with a rare smile breaking through the weathered lines of his face, thanked him, saying he had never expected anything in return, but Nige replied that true honor always finds its way home, even if it takes 13 years, and as the sun set in fiery brilliance across the sky, Ethan mounted the copper horse, the Apache stone resting against his chest, and for the first time in his life he felt the restless storm inside him finally settle, replaced by a peace as deep as the canyon shadows. And dear viewer, if this chapter touched your heart, if Ethan's journey reminds you that kindness always returns, then do one thing for us: hit that subscribe button right now, because more inspiring stories, more powerful journeys, and more life-changing lessons are waiting for you, and we promise each one will be worth your time.